My name is Daniel Pope. I'm the executive director of the Seattle and Bellevue 2030 districts, and we're here today for the Clean Buildings Law and Incentive Program webinar. So hopefully you all are in the right place. Um, I've been the executive director of Bellevue 2030 district since our launch a couple of years ago. The Bellevue 2030 district has been supported by the city of Bellevue and the incredible environmental stewardship team at the city. They've been tremendous supporters of us. We are part of a national network of 2030 districts. And can everybody see my screen okay? Let me know if not. Um, we have 26 districts across North America in places like New York, Dallas, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Toronto, all of whom are committed to a 50% reduction in energy use, water consumption, and transportation emissions by the year 2030. Um, we're always looking to expand into new municipalities, and we've been going strong for a long time. Seattle was the first, and we even have added a few more in the last year. So very excited about the network who are going to be joining us in Seattle on September 30th through October 1st. A couple of the 2030 districts are going to be coming out for our annual summit, which will be a hybrid event, but we'll be hosting a small reception, a members only reception on September 30th. So if you haven't heard from us already, we'll be reaching out with additional details for how you can get registered for that. It's a free to attend event at Methune's offices on the Seattle waterfront. So we hope to see you there. All right, our agenda today is we're going to cover the Clean Buildings Law. We're going to look at key components of the law, starting with an overview of the law, what its objectives are, and then we'll briefly review benchmarking. We'll get into documenting compliance. We will also then transition into discussing what the Clean Buildings Incentive Program looks like and the other resources that are available to assist with your compliance journey. We've also got dedicated time for a Q&A session. So if you, at the end, if you feel like you have some questions that you would like answered, there's a lot of folks on this call who can help get those answered. So that's what we're going to be covering today. If you do have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat and we will either answer them as we go along or save them for the end. All right. So if anyone is still unfamiliar with the Clean Buildings Law, basically it establishes energy efficiency standards and compliance deadlines for large buildings in Washington to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and promote sustainable building practices. It's managed by the Washington State Department of Commerce, who have a lot of guidance and support materials on their website. They also have Luke Howard, who is the go-to guy for answering all of your technical questions associated with that. So if there's something that we can't answer here or can't be answered through the Clean Building Incentive Program, which I can't imagine what that would be, but they are your final definitive answer for all things related to the Clean Buildings Law. Great. So the timeline, the state established the Clean Buildings Performance Standard back in May of 2019. Notification went out to Tier 1 buildings back in July 2021. That's the letter that you'll hear people often referring to. The first compliance deadline for Tier 1 buildings is now less than a year away, which means that for those 220,000 square foot buildings and up, the journey has begun. Um, by June 2028, all Tier 1 buildings will have to be reporting on compliance. Um, Tier 1 buildings include most commercial buildings. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about Tier 1 and who's involved. All right, so there's also Tier 2 buildings. Tier 2 buildings should have received notification about the performance standard over the summer. At the same time, the incentive program for early compliance for Tier 2 buildings was launched. By July 2027, that's going to be the first reporting deadline for Tier 2 sites. There are currently no established targets for Tier 2 to comply with, but adoption of standard is expected in December 2030, and rules would take effect in July 2031. That doesn't make it easy for folks to have such a short turnaround time to comply with those targets. So we recommend people start thinking about this early, especially for uh, big multifamily properties and commercial properties of 20,000 square feet or more. Um, so that's the timeline that we're looking at. All right, let's get into some key elements of the law. The biggest piece of this, and I think the thing that most of our commercial property owner and multifamily property owner members are concerned with, is the non-compliance penalties. So, non-compliance for the clean buildings law for tier one, if a building doesn't comply, there's a base penalty of $5,000. And that basically means if you don't hit your energy target, there's a base penalty of $5,000 plus an additional $1 for every square foot of the building. And this penalty would also trigger or may trigger a comprehensive non-compliance mitigation plan, which would basically be designed to address the issues that led to the non-compliance. Additionally, if these penalties remain unpaid, a third-party collection company might be utilized by the Department of Commerce. So it's a very real risk for property owners when they're thinking about how they want to go about prioritizing some of the changes that they would need to make to get into compliance with the Clean Buildings Law. Um, for tier two buildings, the penalty is a little lighter, coming in at only 30 cents per square foot. So there is a little bit of relief there for folks who may have a longer journey to getting into compliance with the Clean Buildings Law. There's also an early adopter incentive program that is available. So these incentives are available for a limited period of time. Once you complete your application, your building has to comply within 36 months. So to qualify, your building would need to achieve an energy use intensity, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a minute, but that's at least 15 points below the target energy use intensity. For tier one buildings, you can receive $2 per square foot. That's up from, I think, 75 cents last year, or when the incentive was first put in place, plus an additional 5 cents for every KBTU below your 15 EUI point reduction. For tier two buildings, the maximum allocation is 150 million with an incentive of 30 cents per square foot per project. So there's quite a bit of money that's in this. I think when we were originally starting out, there was like 75, 80 million in the hopper. So represents pretty much a doubling of that amount. For multifamily building owners who are willing to sign an anti-displacement agreement, they may be eligible for an enhanced incentive of about 75 cents per square foot too. So there's more in this. There's kind of more and more coming into this early adopter incentive program as a way to help ease the burden of complying with the Clean Buildings Law. So applications are due 1 year before a building's reporting date. That does mean that for those 220,000 square foot buildings, that has come and gone because we are now within a year of compliance. Okay, let's go over some of the building exemptions under the Clean Buildings Law. So federal buildings and buildings that belong exclusively to recognized tribes are not subject to the Clean Buildings Law requirements. If a building does not have a certificate of occupancy or a temporary certificate of occupancy for a consecutive 12-month period within the 2 years prior to the compliance date, it may qualify for an exemption. So if the building is not occupied, doesn't have that certificate, then it may be eligible for exemption. Buildings with an average physical occupancy of less than 50% of the conditioned floor area for the calendar year prior to the compliance date are also eligible for an exemption. So if you have really low occupancy, you can, or even just half occupancy, you're going to potentially be eligible for an exemption. For buildings that are facing financial hardship, there are specific criteria that allow for the exemption. And there's more details on how to submit an application that can be found through the Clean Buildings portal on the Department of Commerce's website. Also, exemptions for buildings used primarily for manufacturing or industrial purposes and agricultural structures are exempt from this. So for a full list of exemptions, you can go to the WAC, the law, which can be accessed through the Clean Buildings law resources, and you can explore what the exemptions are there. You can also find out if you're exempt by participating in the Clean Building Incentive Program. Well, we'll talk about that a little bit more down the road here. So if you want to go the exemptions route, applications have to be submitted no sooner than 3 years prior to the compliance date and no later than 180 days before that date. So you can't do it more than 3 years out and no later than 180 days before the date. And buildings will only officially be exempt after they get approval from the Washington State Department of Commerce. So it's important to not think that you're going to be exempt until you know for certain. I'm going to just pause now. We have a question in the chat from Kulsum. Quick question on previous slide for the early adopter incentive. Should it say 15 points above the EUI target to be eligible? Yes, it should. Good catch. You should be 15 points above the EUI target, not below. So you have to drop at least 15 EUI points and get from out of compliance to in compliance. Thank you for the catch. We'll make that update in our slides. All right. So now we want to kind of talk a little bit about the pathway to compliance. So the first step is to benchmark the buildings. Then we're comparing our energy use intensity determined in the benchmarking to a established energy use intensity target or an EUIT. If we're not below the target, then we need to assess what improvements are needed. We have to make those improvements and then track and report the performance of the building to make sure that what we've planned and actually put into place is functioning. So talking briefly about benchmarking, we won't spend long here, but if there are any folks looking to learn more in depth about the law and the steps needed to comply, please reach out to us directly or to the city's Clean Building Incentive Program. We're all here to help. But benchmarking basically tracks a building's energy use and is comparing it against the standard. So this helps identify ways to improve efficiency and reduce costs and lower the environmental impact of your building. So this is the basic formula for calculating your energy use intensity. And I think a lot of folks on here are pretty familiar with this, but just to revisit, we're taking your annual energy use in kBTUs and dividing it by the gross floor area. Your gross floor area is something that you want to look at really closely. We have heard of people who have been able to who were not accurately looking at their gross floor area, and the bigger it gets, the lower the energy use intensity gets because you're using less energy or more the same amount of energy over a larger square footage. So you want to make sure that you're accurately assessing your gross floor area. So you can find your building's Energy Star Portfolio Manager account, and in ESPM you can use you have to use Energy Star Portfolio Manager for tracking energy use. That's one of the big things about this. Also, the 2030 district and others can assist with setting up Energy Star Portfolio Manager if you don't already have it. I do want to flag, thinking back to the gross floor area thing, parking is not included in the gross floor area. So that's something that you'll want to make sure that you're not including when you're calculating your total gross floor area, which Energy Star does as well. It differentiates between your sort of building gross floor area and your parking floor area as well. So now that you've worked on figuring out what your energy use intensity is, we move on to step 2, which is comparing the energy use intensity that was found in ESPM to the energy use intensity target. And you have to start doing this by calculating the energy use intensity target, which is based on basically the ASHRAE standard for energy use in different building types. So these are some of the currently published targets by building use type. Bellevue and in Seattle are in climate zone 4C, otherwise known as Western Washington. No surprise there. This is just a snapshot. It's not the full list, but this gives you a sense of some of the common building use types and what their energy use intensity targets are. So the most common one that we see is that commercial office 63 EUI energy use intensity target. That's a very common one that we see. However, when you're thinking about your whole building, you're going to want to adjust for the different kinds of energy use intensity types. So, or sorry, the different building types. So if you want to make sure you're getting at the most accurate energy use intensity target possible, you need an accurate gross floor area. You want to look at what the various different building use types are in your building, because most buildings do have multiple use types. And you're going to want to use those different types that have different EUI targets associated with them to create kind of uh, a weighted energy use intensity target. So you can take this building as an example. It's color coded by use type. So we've got red is the office space, blue is an urgent care, a clinic, kind of medical space, and then green would be like a non-refrigerated warehouse. Um, this is a good example of a building that's going to have pretty dramatically different energy use intensity targets. So the non-refrigerated warehouse is going to have a pretty low energy use intensity target. Office is going to be 63, and the hospital urgent care is probably going to be pretty significantly higher than that, as most medical facilities seem to have a higher energy use intensity target. And then you're weighting that by the gross floor or the total square footage of each building use type. If you want to keep things simple, however, and you're like, you know what, that seems like way too much work, you can do just one building use type if you have a building that with one dominant use type. So if you have a building that is 75% or more of the gross floor area is office, you can just use that when you're calculating this. If you have a building that has a big variety, you're going to need to go that sort of weighted EUIT route. Um, Also, typically speaking, if you go with just one building use type, you're going to have a lower energy use intensity target than you might if you actually do the weighted approach where you're weighting across multiple different use types. And that's because typically what we see is office with, some higher energy use intensity building use types in it, like, a cafe or a restaurant or something like that. So this is kind of a breakdown of how we do these adjustments when we're weighting the different building use types. So we follow this case of the example building by completing the spreadsheet. This is a spreadsheet that is available through the Washington State Department of Commerce. So this is a very simple tool to kind of help you figure out what you need to do. You can pull all of your data out of Energy Star Portfolio Manager and essentially plug it into this thing, and it can get you your energy use intensity target. A very quick walkthrough of this. Basically, what you're looking at is you've got your office space. You're putting the gross floor area in for that. The urgent care, the non-refrigerated, that's going to give you the fractional floor area. What percent of the building is represented by these different use types. The activity energy target, or EUIT. So this is what the energy use intensity target is for those different use types: 63 for office, 90 for urgent care, 36 for non-refrigerated warehouse. And then we're plugging in the weekly hours. How many hours of the week is that building use type in operation? And then there's one other factor here, which is these operating shift normalization factors, which is how often that space is being utilized. And that kicks out a number for you that is factored into your energy use intensity target. So it's important to note these two adjustments, the operating shift normalization factor, and also there's a more aggressive energy use intensity target for more recently built buildings. So if a building was built, or sorry, permitted uh, after 2016, then it's considered a newer building and it has more aggressive targets. Great. All right. So now we'll evaluate, we'll get into evaluation and benchmarking the outcomes. So now that you have an energy use intensity and an energy use intensity target, you need to determine whether you're above or below the target. If you're below, you're just moving ahead to step five, which is reporting. And if you're above, then we move to step three. And step three and four kind of go hand in hand. So we're going to assess what improvements are needed and implement them to reach the compliance target. So some common energy efficiency measures are things like lighting systems, building automation systems, HVAC. Some of these things are higher, some of these things are lower. On the like kind of far end, you could be dealing with your building envelope where you're actually trying to reduce the amount of energy that's leaking out of your building through heat loss and that kind of thing. And on the perhaps more affordable side, you would have your lighting systems that can be done and are also very heavily incentivized through the utility. PSE will actually fund, if you want to go with luminaire level lighting controls, just as an example, super high efficiency lighting system with really great controls associated with it. They will fund the incentive is 100% or more of the difference between what you would be paying for your base level lighting system and the luminaire level lighting controls. So, little shout out to PSC there, but that's a really great example of an incentive that can go a long way towards helping you hit your energy use intensity target. Um, there's service providers that can help assess and implement these measures and figure it out. When you participate in the Clean Building Incentive Program, that's something that they can help support with as well as figuring out what kind of measures might be a good opportunity for your building. Okay, and finally, we get into the reporting side. So once implementation is complete, it's time to track and report performance, which again is happening through Energy Star Portfolio Manager. Now, those of you that have been following the news are probably aware of the fact that Energy Star Portfolio Manager is kind of up in the air. We don't know if that's something that as a program is going to be cut. If it is, then what the state and local municipalities that have building performance standards are going to do is either find an alternative. At the 2030 network, we've been having a lot of hair pulling about Energy Star Portfolio Manager. But it's an incredibly valuable tool which provides tremendous ROI for taxpayers. So we think it's a super valuable um, program, and we'd like to see it continue to be funded. And not to get on a soapbox, but the Seattle and Bellevue 2030 districts have supported calls to Congress and folks to try and maintain funding for Energy Star Portfolio Manager. It's a tremendous free resource that helps property owners manage a whole bunch of different aspects of their building's performance, and we'd like to see it continue to be a viable tool for folks. So, reach out to your congressman. So there's a couple of different compliance forms that I wanted to flag when you're thinking about actually reporting on your on your building's energy performance. Form A communicates the building's compliance reporting requirements and identifies the qualified person. It includes documentation of a building's weather normalized energy use intensity and calculated energy use intensity target. Uh, it also requires uploading the energy management plan and operations and maintenance program. which are two of the other pieces that you're going to need. And all of these forms have to be signed by the building owner, a qualified person, which the Department of Commerce has a lot of resources for determining, if a person is the qualified person that you would need, energy manager and commerce to sign off on all of these forms. Form B identifies the building activity types, operating shifts, which is that how many hours a week is that building being utilized, and or that particular building use type within the building is being utilized, and the energy use intensity target. And then Form C also documents the energy use intensity calculations using Energy Star Portfolio Manager. So this is not a complete list of forms, but these are the major forms that you're going to have to get ready when you're thinking about submitting all of your documents to the Department of Commerce. I also want to talk a little bit about the energy management plan. So the energy management plan is a living document. There's a template available from Commerce, so you don't need to create it out of whole cloth. You can go to their resources and find an example there, which we highly recommend. You can find the template in the Clean Buildings Performance Standard document library, which is where a lot of their documents are housed and is a really great resource. It's required for all reporting buildings in Tier 1 and Tier 2. I'll say a lot of our service providers that are in the 2030 network can also help assist with getting your energy management plan figured out. Thanks to Pat for throwing that link into the chat as well. There's also your operations and maintenance program. So you've got your energy management plan and your operations and management program. And this is another key form. The O&M program basically outlines what the building needs to do in terms of operations to maintain or meet their energy use intensity target. So this is kind of your ongoing approach for compliance with the Clean Buildings Law. You can find the template in the Clean Buildings Performance Standard Library, same place as the Energy Management Plan. And it's also a required document for Tier 1 and Tier 2 reporting. So this is another big piece of the puzzle. So with that, we're now going to turn to the Clean Buildings Incentive Program. This is the program that's being offered through the city of Bellevue. It's also being offered, oh gosh, Pat, back me up on this, but in Redmond and Issaquah, I believe. So we've got some folks on the Redmond side here as well today. This is just a phenomenal program. Basically, everyone has kind of approached this differently. The Seattle and some of the utilities have kind of gone the navigator route, where they are trying to help you kind of understand and go through the process of compliance and doing a little, hand holding along the way to kind of show you how that is basically telling you everything you need, kind of going through a much more detailed version of what I've kind of covered here today with a little bit more guidance. The Clean Building Incentive Program is sort of taking it a step beyond that and saying, we're going to actually do your building performance assessment for you, which is a super valuable thing for property owners because you are in a lot of ways kind of skipping the step of having to figure out how to do that all yourself, how to figure out your what kind of contractor or service provider you want to bring in. It is basically providing that service to you, which is incredibly valuable and has been very successful so far. So about 55 to 65% of covered buildings in Bellevue are estimated to be below their energy use intensity target and are already compliant from an energy efficiency perspective, which is fantastic because there are other municipalities that are dealing with a much older building stock and are going to have a harder time getting into compliance, that have a much larger number or larger percentage of their buildings that are still not going to be in compliance right out the gate. So about 35 to 45% of covered buildings in Bellevue are estimated to be above their energy use intensity target. And that's really the audience for this. Well, everybody has to do reporting if you're a tier one or tier two building. It's those that 35 to 45% of covered Bellevue buildings that are going to need to take some kind of action to improve performance and comply with the Clean Buildings Law. So, and these numbers, I should say, are based partially on program data coming out of the Clean Building Incentive Program, um, and partially with the understanding that benchmarked building data skews towards higher performing and more professionally run or more scientifically run buildings. So, we think we're in a good spot, but, there might be a number of buildings out there that uh, still are out of compliance, and we need to kind of work on getting the word out about this program as a mechanism by which they can get into shape. Um, and the program is just fantastic. It offers free technical support and services like energy benchmarking, scoping assessments, incentive navigation, compliance reporting support. A lot of the work that we've kind of discussed up to this point that is required under the Clean Buildings Law, this is a program that can help you, if not get all the way there, get a pretty significant part of the way on your journey to compliance. And it is coming at a significant value to property owners. We estimate that it's about $18,000 in value that you're just getting gratis from the city of Bellevue as a way to get into compliance with this. And over 300 buildings have participated in the program already, which is fantastic. It does mean that there's still a number of buildings outstanding out there that we'd love to kind of get into the program and be aware of this because it's basically free money that they're going to have to utilize at one time or another. So getting started early is the best way to take advantage of the incentives that are out there. Um, so a little program update on the Clean Building Incentive Program. This spring, the city of Bellevue issued an RFQ for firms to continue to help support the Clean Building Incentive Program. City of Bellevue should have a program administrator in place soon. So don't hesitate to reach out to Patrick Babbitt at the City of Bellevue, who is a point person for the Clean Building Incentive Program. They can help you get things going with this. And we're really excited to see what sort of the next phase of this program looks like. I wanted to call out one case study, which is Maidenbauer Center. So, a little bit of an unusual, and thank you to Patrick for putting, Pat Babbitt for putting his contact information in the chat. We'll send that around afterwards as well. But Maidenbauer Center, it's kind of been the poster child for the Clean Building Incentive Program because they have been working through the process to complete the necessary upgrades for compliance. They had a long way to go, but basically they did the benchmarking and looked at how the building was performing overall. That assessment was performed by the Clean Building Incentive Program administrator, and it showed that the facility was really out of compliance with the CBPS. Generally speaking, for a performing arts center, the energy use intensity target is 33 EUI. So they have a low energy use intensity target. It's almost half of what a commercial office in space would be looking at in terms of their energy use intensity target. So they proposed, with the help of the Clean Building Incentive Program and the project program administrator, they identified 16 capital projects to reduce their annual energy use intensity by 39.5 points. And that kind of gives you a sense of how far out above the energy use intensity target they were. But they're going to be reducing their energy consumption by over 40%, which is really, really incredible. And I don't know that that would be a possible thing to do without having such a robust program in place as the Clean Building Incentive Program that is helping folks kind of navigate everything that they need to do and figure out what kinds of projects they can utilize to get there. So that's the Clean Building Incentive Program. Again, there's a lot of great resources out there. I really recommend you, if you're a Redmond person, reach out to Micah Bunkowski On the Redmond side, reach out to Pat Babbitt if you are in the city of Bellevue. You can always reach out to the 2030 districts. We are here to help and try and facilitate folks figuring out how they can get into compliance with the state requirements. I wanted to also briefly touch on some other resources that are available. Um, as far as I understand it, there are still some federal tax credits and deductions that can be taken. 179D, we believe, is still available. It's going to sunset soon, but it can be claimed on projects that begin before June 30th of 2026. There's the 48E tax credit, which was going to be phased out by the end of 2027, and 60%, and there's a 60% credit for projects that begin construction in 2026. So it's better to start early while there are still available resources for on the federal credit and deduction side. There are also 179D sunsets for projects beginning construction after June 30th, 2026. Thank you, Kristen. Yeah, it's time is growing short for some of these projects, so we need to get moving. There are others really fantastic. I kind of spoke briefly about PSC's commissioning or incentive programs. They also have a commissioning program, which is their existing building commissioning program. They have monitoring-based commissioning, building tune-ups, and pay for performance. I'm loath to get into it, but they also have a really cool demand response program, which some other large municipalities in the region we're hoping will follow suit before too long and follow PSC's lead. As you're thinking about, what kinds of energy efficiency measures you want to put in place, if something is going to have a building controls upgrade associated with it, I strongly recommend that you reach out to PSC and figure out what it would take to get involved in their demand response program, because the demand response program basically would allow you to utilize your building's BMS system to make adjustments to the energy use that you have, and then at various different times to avoid using energy during those peak times. And PSC will basically reimburse you for the energy that you don't use during that time. The folks on the call who are representing PSC can probably speak more to it, but it's a really fantastic program where your BMS system can start to work for you, not just in terms of energy savings, but also in terms of getting reimbursed by the utility for and it's not very often. It's a handful of times a year so far that you would need to either do preheating or pre-cooling that could help you uh, basically reduce your energy use during those peak times. It'll help support the grid, which is something that is just so crucial to maintaining our energy availability across the board. Um, there's also third party funding that's available. The CPACER funding is something that is available under through King County. Really recommend that people look into that. It can help fund a lot of your energy efficiency improvements with just typically a lower rate of interest. It's also a property assessment, so it kind of supersedes whatever other uh, it kind of supersedes the rest of your capital stack when you're thinking about that, and it stays with the building as opposed to being something that is debt that will be carried forward in the event that a building is transacted upon and goes to a different ownership. So something else to think about. PACE programs generally have gotten a lot greater uptake in other parts of the country, and we would like to see more of that getting transacted on here in the Pacific Northwest. So I just wanted to flag these are some of the additional resources. There's the Department of Commerce that has all of the resources associated with the Clean Buildings Law. The Smart Building Center is just a fantastic resource. They've got their BOC program. They've got an array of education resources. If you're a building operator, you should have Smart Building Center on speed dial. They're a really fantastic resource. And then PSC's accelerator program. So I kind of talked a little bit about how some of the different utilities and municipalities have approached this a little bit differently than the city of Bellevue. PSE's accelerator program and the Clean Building Incentive Program are sort of a one-two punch that are a fantastic combination for Seattle-based um, uh, property owners when they're thinking about how they want to navigate compliance with the Clean Buildings Law. Just because you can get that kind of the accelerator program is sort of like a boot camp that can help you fully understand the law and everything that you need to do to comply with it. And then the clean building incentive program is going to actually kind of get you off the starting blocks with that first step that you need to do when you're thinking about your building and figuring out where you stand. So these are two programs that really go hand in hand, and we encourage everyone to take advantage of both of them. All right. And with that, I'm going to pause now after talking everyone's ear off for a brief Q&A. We've got a lot of great folks on the call, so if you want to ask questions directly to the City of Bellevue or to PSC, we've got a variety of folks available to answer any questions that you may have. So I will open it now up for questions.